starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone to this week's webinar, Build Your AutoCAD IQ webinar. We want to thank you all for attending. This week we'll be talking about layouts and page setups and many different ways that those can be used, and give some different hints and ideas on how you can become more productive with those. So Volker and Christina, as you can see on your screen, will be presenting today. And so I will turn this over to Volker.
All right, John, thank you, and thanks, Christina, for being here. And we also have Jason Forelli, who will be moderating and who will also be doing a webinar on November 20th for sheet sets. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more information at the end of the session here about that. Right now, let's go ahead and, before we get started, be sure to leave any questions you have in the chat window. We'll take a pause whenever we can to, we will definitely take a pause so that we can take a look at those and answer your questions to the best of our ability. We'll have a Q&A session after the presentation. So if we don't get to your question right away, we will get to it at the end of the session. And if you need to, or would like to take a look at some of our added webinars coming up, you can visit our landing page. I've provided the URL on the slide here, but I also realize it is difficult to memorize those, and maybe you aren't ready to write them down. So in the survey that you will be receiving from GoToMeeting after this webinar, this URL as well as the URL for our feedback page will be sent to you in that survey. Additionally, in that survey, there will be a link to our slide deck that we're using in this presentation, which has some additional resource links. And for those who have attended in the past and have noticed that we have not uploaded some of our videos, we have had we are going through a stage right now where we are revamping that landing page. So because of things out of my control, we haven't been able to upload our additional videos. Therefore, in that survey, there is also a link to the slide deck as well as previous recordings of our webinars. So our plotting webinar, for example, or the external reference webinar from last week. All right, having said that, I'm going to turn this over to Christina.
Thanks, Volker. So as we do every week, we like to highlight our Autodesk Knowledge Network and let you know some of the newer articles we have in case you see anything listed that sounds familiar that you and your coworker might be experiencing. But one in particular there that we did want to highlight again was with AutoCAD Architecture and MEP 2014 and some stability issues with Microsoft updates that were released over the summer. We just want to let everyone know that those have been resolved through a Microsoft security bulletin, and the links are included on the deck, the slide deck that Volker will be providing in that post email. So even if you yourself are not using one of those products or experiencing this, you may want to forward it to your IT department just so that they know if there's anyone else they're supporting that they can go ahead and get that ready for them. And as usual, we usually do have a couple of polls that we'd like you to join in with us. So I have a couple polls I'm going to run right now. First one, which usually goes pretty quickly, is just, are you a subscription customer? And so far it looks like we have 100% yes. Those votes came in pretty quickly. Thank you very much. So we do appreciate that. I'm going to close that poll. And we'd just like to know if you ever attended a webinar before, or if this is your first time. We thank you very much for attending. And about 70% of you are regulars, so we appreciate you coming back. And for the 31% of you that it's your first time, we do welcome you. Okay, and then my next poll was just talk about our Knowledge Network downloads page. And we just wanted to get an idea of how often you're visiting that. Maybe you didn't realize there was a downloads page. Maybe you check it every so often, or you get an email from IT. All right, so a large majority of you check it monthly, which is really good, ever so often just to see if there's anything new. And about 30% of you would like to know a little bit more about that. So perfect. So that's what we're going to take a look at right now. I believe Volker has the page up. So the downloads page for every product is important because it's where we post service packs, hot fixes that are released, and it also stores past versions. So if you're looking for the service pack for 2015 AutoCAD, or also going farther back to the service pack for 2014, it's a good place to know where it is. So you start on our initial Knowledge Network page, and under Support you click Browse for Products, and then you're going to choose your product, such as AutoCAD. And then it brings you to the support page for AutoCAD, and we'll click the Downloads tab, and you'll see the list of downloads. Now they are in order of kind of how they've been released. Every so often there might be a service pack that's just in the search at the bottom, but this is where you'd go to see if there's any new service packs, hot fixes, things that would help your performance. All right, thank you for that, Volker. And before I turn it back to you and we start getting into layouts, we have one more poll that we want to take a look at, and it's a bit of trivia from the minds and deep depths of Volker's memory. So the question is, when was Paperspace introduced? And you have a couple of options. Careful, you might age yourself depending on certain releases that you pick. And looks like release 11 and 14 are neck and neck. A couple picking release 9. All right, I'm going to close that poll. It looks like 57% guess release 14. Volker?
Oh, and I'm sorry to say, the 29% who picked release 11 are correct. Release 11 introduced Paperspace and external references. So kudos to those who got that one right.
Don't feel bad if you didn't, because I thought release 14 too. So,
and release
that's
2.
the only one that really mattered, right? Was release 14.
Yeah, that's true, isn't it? And that's probably why we go to it right away. But we do have release 2000 there, and that is because that is the release in which layouts were introduced, which is just another way of saying Paperspace. Okay, it just allows us to add additional Paperspace environments. So let's just talk about this here. Some of this may be a little bit familiar to you if you were in our plotting webinar. Okay, first of all, what layouts did was it allowed us to add additional Paperspace environments to our drawing. Up to 255 layouts can be included in an AutoCAD drawing. This does include model, okay? I would say this is great, you can do this, but your system resources are going to be, they're going to be taxed, okay? It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but I wouldn't go hog wild about it. We have the sheet set manager, which allows us to work a little more effectively if you're going to have over 255 sheets in a drawing. The model layout is limited because it only allows us to work with one scale factor. Paperspace provides a lot more flexibility. In addition to the 200-odd layouts that we can have for Paperspace environments, we can create multiple views with multiple scale factors in a layout. Each layout can have up to 64 viewports. Okay. Now the thing is that because of resources, the default setting for viewports in a layout is 16. This is controlled by the max ACTVP system variable. If you were to type that in at the command line, it would show you the default of 16. This is the setting that is saved. You can change it to a value up to 64. Now, again, it all boils down to resources, your graphics card, the RAM on your system, and so forth. But primarily the graphics card, it's only going to display so many items in your layout, so many viewports. Some viewports will appear blank. If you were to plot the drawing, you would be able to see the additional the objects, the model objects in those viewports. If you were to make one active, you would be able to see that viewport. You may have to regenerate the layout using the regen all command, but everything does appear there. And again, the more memory you have, the more you're going to see of the content in the viewports. Again, 64 viewports, that's quite a bit. You know, you could spread those out among layouts. And then the cool thing is, because you scale the viewports, you can then plot a layout at 1:1. Along with the layouts, we would want to apply a page setup to that layout. Okay, the page setup is nothing more than the settings for the plotter. Is it a monochrome? Have we applied a monochrome color table to it, or is it a screened or color plot style table that's been assigned to the layout? What plotter has been assigned to the layout? What paper orientation? And again, what scale factor, if you choose to apply one to it, among other settings. We'll take a look at all those. This is basically the outline of what we'll be covering in this webinar. And so we'll conclude by showing you how to reuse both the layouts and the page setups. I said conclude, but the bottom line is all this stuff works together. So some of the stuff like applying a page setup, I'm going to be incorporating it as I talk about layouts. So having said that, I think we have two final polls that I'd like Christina to run.
We do. So the first one is, how do you add layouts right now? We have a couple of different options that you may or may not have tried out. And while we're getting those values in, Volker, I just wanted to circle back to what you were talking about, the number of 255 viewports. And one of the questions we often get a lot is, well, what's the number? How many is too many? What's going to happen? And just like you said, there is no magic number. It's variable depending on what you have for systems and graphics. I mean, I can speak to personal experience. I find when you're pushing into the 75 to 100 range, you're probably going to notice it if you have a reasonable amount of size. So plan those things up front. Like maybe it's going to be 10 sheets per drawing, or figure out how your team is going to be split up, make sure multiple people can be working, and that's one of the things that Jason will be able to help us with. Sheet Set Manager is really helpful for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Looking at the poll here, it looks like about 18% of you start from scratch every time, and some insert a new title block into a layout. Use the Save As command. Okay, so 24% of you insert a new title block. 41% import from a template. Very good. Excellent. And some of you use Design Center. Awesome. Thank you for that info. I think those starting from scratch every time will find this beneficial, as well as everybody else. All right, one more poll, please. And
So
this...
how do you work with page setups? Similar kind of question, but different area that we'll be looking at. And again, if you're starting from scratch every time, there's probably personal enrichment. You maybe appreciate it more because you have to work for it. But Volker's going to definitely show us some ways to make ourselves more efficient, because if you've got that process down, it can be automated and save you quite a bit of time.
Okay, 38% using existing. Great.
Great.
35. All right, and many of you don't even know what a page setup is, and that's fine. That's what we're going to cover here, okay? And I've already covered it in a brief overview, but let's take a closer look. Alrighty, so first of all, I'm going to show you where some of the tools are at that we will be using here, so that when I go to them later, you're not going to be caught off guard. The first one is found under the Application Browser menu. Here we can, under the Print control, we are able to create page setups as It's one of the many places we can find this. We could also type page setup at the command line. And note that it does tell you a little about it. It just controls the entire layout, how we want things to appear when we plot them out, what devices are we going to use, and other settings. Right now, if we take a look at the default ribbon here in AutoCAD, you'll see that there's a layout tab that is not visible. And that's in previous releases of AutoCAD. For those of you who have worked with previous releases, you would actually see another tab up here. And the way it works with AutoCAD 2015, and I believe 2014, is that when you switch to a layout, you actually have this tab available. And here again, we can create a new layout. We could also create one from a template. Here we can create a page setup and apply viewports. I'll show you some of the viewports here in a few moments. Be aware that a polygonal viewport is not available in AutoCAD LT. So if you're running that, pretty much everything else works. And if somebody sends you a drawing that has a polygonal viewport in it, so non-rectangular viewport, then you would still be able to see it. You just aren't able to create it. You're able to work with it, though. We have some other settings here, like the ability to clip a viewport and lock a viewport. There are easier ways to lock a viewport than to go to the ribbon, but it's good to know where things are. So when I switched in this new drawing to this layout, you'll have noticed too, I'm going to go ahead and switch to layout 2. In this case, it brings up what is called the Page Setup Manager, which is the Page Setup command. Right now, there are no page setups in this drawing, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. What I want to show you, by moving over the command line or typing in OP or options, I'm selecting options here, and under the display tab, this is where we can control the elements of a layout. All right, so display the layout model, layout and model tabs. Those are these tabs right here. Okay, if you don't want to see those, you can turn them off. I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to see those. Display the printable area. I'll show you what that is in a second. Show the Page Setup Manager for new layouts. That's the dialog that popped up. Okay, and then we have a paper shadow, the paper background, and create viewport in new layout. So basically, what happened is that as I switched to this layout in a new drawing, or even in a existing drawing, if you click on create a new layout from scratch, the Page Setup Manager pops up, which allows me to go right ahead and create one. If I dismiss it or if I had disabled that, it creates the layout on an A-size sheet of paper. That's what we're seeing right now, and it creates a viewport. This viewport is just a window into model space. Since there's nothing in this drawing, we're not seeing anything. When it referred to the printable area, that is what this dashed line is for. This shows the parameters that the plotter will print to, okay, based upon your printer driver or your PC3 file. Next week, we will have a webinar on working with PC3 files and printer drivers, so we'll talk more about how you can manipulate that at that time. The shadow is just a little border around what is the sheet of paper. So basically, it gives you a WYSIWYG view of what your drawing would look like. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of what a page looks like, your layout looks like, if you were to do it from scratch. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a drawing that I've set up here. It's a floor plan of a building. And in this drawing, I have already created a layout, which is a D-size monochrome layout. And it has a page setup applied to it. Here's another way we can get to these tools. Page Setup Manager, right there. New layout just creates a new one from scratch, as well as picking one from a template. So basically, you can save your layouts in a template file that can be a DWT or DWG file, and then you can import those, and we'll do that in a few moments, into your current drawing. We also have a move or copy functionality, so I can make a copy of this layout. I'll select Move to End and create a copy and click OK. This is a default if you're running AutoCAD 2015 without Service Pack 2 applied. Okay, in previous versions, we could drag and drop. We lost that functionality initially in AutoCAD 2015. Service Pack 2, so everybody note this, Service Pack 2 has brought those settings back. What I can do is holding down on the Control key, I can select a layout and then drag and drop it to a new location, giving me a quick copy of that layout. So why is this important? Well, I don't know about you. I'm kind of lazy when it comes to doing things in AutoCAD. I want to automate things. I don't want to have to recreate them. I've created a copy. I can modify it the way I want to. All right. So I'm going to get back to page setups in a moment. We're going to take a look right now at viewports. Okay, because oftentimes much of this is set up for you already. All you need to do is maybe create some viewports for your AutoCAD drawing. So I'm going to switch over to the Layout tab. And for what it's worth, for those of you who like working with the command line, you can type mview, or MV as the default alias, to create a viewport. So what happens here, if I just want to create a rectangular viewport, is, and note the command line, if I were to hit enter right now, it would create a viewport fit to the page, plottable parameters of the page. Typically, this is not what you would want, okay, because you have a title block like we have right here. You would want to be a little more precise about the parameters of your viewport. So we have other options. I'm not going to get into all of these, but we could easily just, in 2014 and 2015, select a number by clicking on it here or by typing in the amount of viewports you would like. I'm going to go ahead and just, to demonstrate, I clicked on the 2, and that gives me an option for vertical or horizontal, vertical being the default. So I could just hit the Enter command, and it now says, okay, specify the first corner or a fit option. Fit, again, will apply to the entire plottable area. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick a spot here, and it's created my viewport. Now the one thing I'll say is that right now I've just created that on layer 0. Okay, so when I plot this right now, the viewports will plot. The border, that is. The content we want to plot, but maybe we don't want to see the viewports themselves. Some people do, some people don't. I don't. I like to see them on my sheet, but when I plot, I really don't care to see them that much. So I actually created a layer, and got to find my layer. I might have deleted my layer. Awkward moment. Anyway, I'll go into the layer command real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. And typically I have one called Viewport or Viewports. You may see it as Viewport, doesn't matter. And I like to assign a light color to it, like the color number 8 or 9, excuse me. Click OK. And the cool thing about this is that I will make this a non-plottable viewport. We have this in the layer manager, this plot column. And by selecting it, I can say anything on this layer, do not plot it. Okay? And once I've done that, and usually it's already done, and I've already made it current, in this case I'm just going to select the viewports. I'll go ahead and select the viewport layer. Those objects are now on that layer, and if I do a preview, those viewports do not plot.
So Volker, isn't that just what the def points layer is for?
Good question. Well said or asked. So in case you aren't even familiar with the def points layer, I'm not sure, oops, what am I doing? LA. In this drawing, we have a layer called def points. And this has been around since AutoCAD trivia time, release 12. And it was introduced for those little points you have, the anchors for your dimension styles. Okay, for any dimensions you place, there are little points there. They anchor onto the objects. That's what the def points layer was. People did not want those to plot, so Autodesk incorporated a layer that gets created every time you use a dimension command, and this layer does not plot. So you feel free to use this if you want. But we can now also choose to make any layer be specifically a plot or non-plottable layer, and it's better to be able to name a layer so that it's a little more descriptive than it is to use something like def points. One thing about def points is that it and the layer 0 are created by AutoCAD. One thing I'd point out too is that, hey, if you're going to make a layer plottable or not plottable, I should say, or if you're going to use layer def points, don't bother freezing or turning them off. There's no point to that unless you don't want to see them in the drawing. In that case, you didn't even have to use a plottable layer or non-plottable layer. I've seen drawings where they're both off and frozen, and really no reason for that. It will just confuse the issue for some people.
And also don't turn off or freeze your layer 0. Or
exactly. Yeah.
We'll lock them.
All right.
And it looks like we might have a question, but actually, apparently, our attendee Levi and I have Wonder Twin psychic powers because it was the exact same question I asked about def points. So,
oh, okay.
That answers your question, Levi.
Yeah, I was about to cut in, but then I assumed that you were just reading that from the question page.
I was not. Wonder Twins. Wonder Twins power.
Well, awesome. Yeah, it was a good question. I mean, def points is there, and you can use it or choose not to use it. I prefer to create my own layer for just to be descriptive, if anything. All right, so those are two viewports. Now, the cool thing about viewports is that these viewports can be manipulated. I'm just using grips here, okay? And in this case, I'm also going to go ahead and erase this one for right now because I want to show you some other things about creating the viewports. In order to make a viewport active, we just can double-click within that viewport, double-click outside of it in order to make it make paperspace active. And of course, you can tell by the icon that this is active or that paperspace is active. You could also choose to select paper down here, which then turns to model on your status bar. This allows you to switch back and forth. And there are other ways as well. Okay. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and give this a scale factor because I do want to have the stuff in the viewport set to a scale. Now, the cool thing is if you are familiar with saved or named views, I'm typing V, all right? I have a view here called V1, and what I'm going to do is I know what I want to show in this viewport, and so my saved view, I'm going to set current, click apply, and click OK. And so I didn't have to search for that viewport. What happens when I create a viewport is that AutoCAD will show the extents of the drawing, basically. If you have a very large area, it may be easier to create some views first, and then when you click in the viewport to show that information, you can quickly zoom to that view. Now, it does not assign the scale factor to it. We can see that on the status bar. This is an arbitrary scale AutoCAD's assigned. And I'm going to go ahead and now set that to an 1/8 inch equals a foot. Now, anytime I zoom in or out in this viewport, I am going to lose the scale factor. So we can lock the viewport, which I'll show you in a minute. But while I'm doing this, I want to show you a different tool that was incorporated, again, a little bit of trivia, in AutoCAD 2005. This is called the Maximize Viewport command, okay, on the status bar. I can click on this, or I can select this. I just double-clicked on the border or frame of the viewport. This allows me to zoom in or out of that viewport, take a look at something. Oh yeah, okay, that's how we did that. Once I restore the viewport, I have not lost my scale factor. That's a pretty good, cool tool in a large drawing especially. But bottom line is we should probably lock our viewports. Notice in the property palette, I can lock it here, or I can right mouse click with that viewport and display it locked. This way, when I zoom in or out, I don't lose that scale factor. Okay, so let's take a look at creating a different viewport here. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and create one from an object. And this is kind of neat because at times we may want something a little different in our drawing. I'm going to type C for circle, and I'll just go like that. Okay. Uh-oh, my circle command's not working. Oh, that's because I'm user error. I was in model space. Okay, circle. There we go. All right, I'm just going to create a circle here on the viewport layer. And then I'm going to go over here to Object, and I'm going to tell, hey, let's go ahead and create a viewport. Again, I'll go ahead and just set that view current. Just click Apply here, and OK. Pretty cool, huh? I think it is. And I can't recall offhand if I don't think this is available in AutoCAD LT either. I apologize, I should have checked on that. We can also create a non-polygonal viewport. And basically, it's kind of like drawing a P-line. So let's do, I don't know maybe why, but if you want to outline an area, you could then create that viewport. All I did was close it using C for close. So maybe I would have wanted to draw the outline of the building as the viewport for whatever reason. The bottom line is you can do this. It's pretty cool. So I'm just gonna watch my fingers there.
So Volker, sounds like you're cutting out a little bit.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Although it wasn't my fault.
Okay, well, while we're getting Volker's mic back in order, so I believe where he was just kind of going with this was that, again, you can have multiple different shapes. I'm going to see if we can grab him back. There you are.
All right, good. All right. Hope I didn't lose anybody on that. Basically, I created a viewport from an object and then a non-rectangular viewport just by basically drawing the outline. And I did lose your connection as well, Christina, so I'm not sure if you were able to follow up on that or not. But,
yeah, we were gossiping about you. But
okay. All right.
It is available in LT, so I did take a look at that. LT 2015 does have the option to do the object as well.
Thank you very much. But not the non-rectangular, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And just
all right.
one word on CAD etiquette, use it at your will, but One thing I would recommend too is when you're done with the layout tab and closing the drawing, try to zoom out or zoom extent so people can see your plan, as opposed to being zoomed in really tight on an active viewport and then someone maybe can't realize where they are. That is one way to have people want to.
Yeah, and that's where
Bad CAD juju.
Right, that's where freezing the viewport comes in, but also when you save the drawing, you're saving a preview. So
yeah,
if you want to see that preview in its entirety, the way to do it. All right, so let's take a look at page setup real quick. There's a lot more to viewports. Actually, I do need to backtrack a little bit. In this particular viewport, okay, and I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. Everything looks identical here, but we have some tools within the layer command that we can make use of, and I'm going to breeze through this quickly so that you're aware of it. So I'm typing LA for the layer command, and what I can do is I can freeze viewports to show some content and not show other content. So let's see, we have CPUs here, we have some furniture in here, and so what I'm going to do is, let's bring that layer manager out here a little bit. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and say, look, in the current viewport here, I don't need to see the CPU, I don't need to see the chairs. What I'm doing is freezing this within the viewport. Okay, and I don't need to see phones, printer, maybe I want to see room number. I don't need to see, whoops, furniture. There we go. File cabinet. I mean, this is all stuff, there's no reason for me to see it at this time. And having done that, notice how in this viewport that information is no longer available. But in this one here, same view, I'm still seeing that furniture. Okay, now let's take this one step further. I just need to see that furniture in this viewport, but I don't really need to see it in any future viewports. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and I can do this in any of the viewports, I'll go back into that layer manager, and in this case, I'll say, look, for any new viewports I create, all right, don't show me the filing cabinet, the furniture, phones, printer, and CPU. Okay, and well, okay, all right, I'll get chairs as well. All right, so there we go. So we've done that. I'm going to quickly go ahead and create a new viewport here. I'm just typing MV at the command line, and that quickly allows me to just create a view. And if we take a look at this now, none of those items are there. This is a great way to maybe show all the content in one view, and then as you're showing details, not show it in any additional viewports. Okay? Having said that, here's something else we can do. I'm going to go back into this here, into the viewport, and I'm going to say, for all my, whoops, let's see what layer that's on. I really need to get a better memory going. All right, that is layer panel 201. Okay, so I've made this viewport active, and in the layer command, panel 0201, I would like to show this as a different color. So this is called a viewport override. And what I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and make it a color 9 here to kind of fade into the background. And notice how that is reflected in this viewport, but not in any of the other viewports. And that's pretty cool stuff too for display purposes, and you'll want to use your own standards on that. Now you'll see that having done that, if I make that viewport active again, that in this case, that particular layer is highlighted. This shows me that I have an override, and it could be for color, it can be for the viewport line type, viewport line weight, as well as any plot styles you may have assigned, if you do have any assigned. So you have quite a bit of flexibility in how you want to present your drawing. In order to restore the view overrides, okay, or get rid of them, we would go to remove overrides by right mouse clicking over a layer. Either the selected layer in our current viewport or all viewports, or hey, just go ahead and select all layers in all viewports and restore it to its normal look. And there we go. So again, that was kind of brief, but you're aware that functionality is there now. So let's take a look at creating a page setup. I'm going to create a new drawing from scratch. I'm not going to call this anything at this time. I'm going to go ahead and select New. And I'll call it, we'll just call it Example. Typically, you'd want to call it something specific, like here I have D-size monochrome. You'll see a couple other ones in the drawings that I'll be showing in a few moments. But I'll just click OK, and up pops the Page Setup Manager. And in this manager, sorry, I was looking at the clock to make sure we have a little bit of time left here. We kind of talked about this in our plotting webinar, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. But here I can assign my plotter and change whatever properties I need to for that specific plotter. I'll leave it on the Adobe PDF. I can assign a plot style and say, look, go ahead and display it with that plot style or not. Choose some of the shaded options. For more information on all of these settings, I encourage you to just click the Help button. It'll bring up all the information you need about these options. But basically what I want to show you is that once you've set all this up, and let's say we use something like an architectural D, I wanted to plot everything with line weights, show transparency or not, I won't show that. Plot with plot styles, this is our plot style table up here. We could assign this, but then if we're doing a draft, you can uncheck these options for a quicker output, just for a quick check plot, okay? Our orientation, we could also do a scale factor if we want to. The only time I've ever added a scale factor to a layout is when I've wanted to do a half-size plot. In that case, I'd do a 1:2. Oh, and this one here, that scale factor has been removed. I'll show you that in another drawing in a few minutes. And then I would scale line weights. We would want to scale those to be appropriate to the scale factor. Here we can choose display, layout, or window for our plot area, and we can also change the offset origin. I'm going to show you all this in a moment here in one of our page setups that I've created. I'll click OK. But what I want to do now is I would want to assign this to my layout. Okay, we're in layout 1 right now, which has the asterisks here. You'll notice some of the other layouts have the asterisk, but within that there's a parenthesis here, opening and closing, and you'll see that this is actually the page setup name that has been applied to that layout. So if I click Set Current, it now applies that to layout 1. Let's explore this in greater detail. I'm going to click Close. And what I have here is a library drawing. This library drawing has 2 layouts in it that I've set up. Okay, a couple of viewports here, title block, and if I right mouse click and go into Page Setup Manager, I'm just going to select Modify. It's going to modify the current layout. I'm not really going to make any changes, except that I want to show you how this has been set up. I've applied a DWF6 plotter. paper size. In this case, I've said plot to extents because of, note the hash marks here, the edge of the title block, and note the paper size. It's the plottable area. If I were to choose plottable area, it would plot, give us a little gap between the area on the page. So I want to maximize the amount of room there, or usage of the paper. So I've said plot it to the extents, which is the edges of the title block. And if I wanted to, in my title block, I could have made these, put these on a non-plottable layer. So I mean, these are things you can choose to do or not do. But either way, I've said plot to extents. I've also wanted to apply a little bit of a boundary area. Okay, I wanted to center this a little bit, create a binding edge, okay, in the drawing. So I've scooted the entire drawing over by half a unit from its original 0, insert of the title block. This allows me to give it a little bit of a binding edge to it. In this case here, I am going to go ahead and let's go ahead and assign a monochrome CTB to it and display plot styles and click OK. And since I have modified it, I'm going to close and save those changes to that particular title block. All right, either way, I've created a nice little page setup. Let's take a look at this one here. A little bit different. Zoom out a little bit. You'll see that it is a different title block. Here's the plottable edge of the paper. And it is also within those parameters, but what I'm going to do is just show you how this one's set up. Modify. And this one here, the big difference other than it's going to a PDF driver, go ahead and assign a color to it. And I'm going to go ahead and choose layout. So it plots to those parameters. Let's do a quick preview just to show you what that looks like. All right. Now, I've got all my settings here. This is a library drawing. Keep that in mind. Okay. You're not going to later on see the modifications to those page setups because I never did save those, but I'm going to save my drawing, my library drawing, go back to my floor plan, and let's get rid of some of these layouts here. Delete. Delete. All right. Now you have to have one model and one paper space layout in your drawing at all times. But what I'm going to do is new layout from template. And I'm going to go ahead and go to that library drawing. I'll select it and it shows me the layouts within that particular drawing. So this is one way to do this. We can click OK and it brings in that layout. And notice it brought the viewports with it as well. Let's take a look in the Page Setup Manager. And the only thing it does not bring in is that that particular page setup. Okay, so this is kind of, I'm not sure why it doesn't do this. When this initially came out, I had hoped it would. But what we can do is go into our whoops, excuse me here, into our import command, and from that library drawing, which also has the page setup assigned to it, we can go ahead and choose our page setup that we create that exists in there. It brings that in, and now I can go ahead and assign it to this viewport so that I have plotter settings assigned to the drawing. It's that easy to import these settings from a library drawing. Another way to do this, and I'm using Control-2, you can type ADC if you'd like, is to use Design Center, and I should have set this one up a little bit. Let's go to D drive, and we have my box, and let's go to all these webinars. There we go. All right, so there's my library drawing, and I'm going to go to layouts, and we will choose to I'll just double click it, and it adds that to our layout. Again, we would have to import the page setup associated with that. Let's say that you're going to go ahead and plot using the plot command. Okay, and let's go to the other one where I have a page setup. Since this has a page setup called DWF assigned to it, what if I want to plot it to, say, a different plotter? Okay, so I'll go here and I'll choose PDF driver, and it switches that to none. You can easily do this without affecting the original page setup, because maybe it's just a one-time thing. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, I will go ahead and plot this to the PDF. If I want to keep it that way, I would apply it to the layout. But if I just click OK and plot, then it's a one-time thing, and the next time I go to my page setup or the plot command, it still has the original page setup. Okay, so this is a great way to use your page setups, but if you need to do an override, just use the plot command, choose a different plotter, but do not apply it to the layout. When I copy a layout, as I did earlier, okay, so this one here is D-size extents in monochrome, okay? I've gone ahead and copied this now. I'm going to go into page setup. And I'll go ahead and modify that page setup perhaps. And this was D-size extents, which had the DWF. I've made some changes. I'm going to change this to an AutoCAD STB. I'll click OK. Would I like to apply these to all of the layouts that have this page setup assigned to it? In this case, no, because there's a purpose for that page setup. So I'm going to say no, I just want it to this one. And I'm able to show this here in color, whereas this one here I guess I never brought in the oops, another user error. So in this case, modify display plot styles. Oh, that's why I had that set up. Sorry. Go ahead and click monochrome, click OK. I don't think I want to change that either. Set current, click OK. And doing a regen all, REA. Oh, I thought I did that. Okay, kill some time, Christina, while I'm trying to get myself out of an awkward situation.
Yeah, so we might need to convert P styles, maybe? That sometimes happens.
Yeah, but this
probably
is
looking for a style setup.
It's a CTB, so.
So one of the questions that did come up a little bit earlier when we were talking about the layers and the VP freeze was just, you know, how that setting works and if it's just the layout tab that you're on right now. But it does actually apply to any new viewports going forward. So if you have a line that's on a dimensions layer, let's say, and dimensions is visible in all your previous viewports, but then you go into layer properties and set it to new VP freeze. When you make a new layout tab, or if you make a new viewport on one of those same existing tabs, it will not appear unless you go in and manually adjust that. So it is for anything going forward, whether new or existing layout tabs, but it doesn't change anything that was already present. So old viewports will still have dimensions showing if it was there.
Excellent, thank you. So, Christina, my apologies. I grabbed the wrong sample drawing. This is something we'll talk about during our plot style webinar.
It's a preview, is what we were doing. Right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, good one. Good save. All right.
This is a preview of PC3s and plot style tables.
Yeah. The one thing you need to be aware of, and this is actually a good mistake to have happened, is that I grabbed a page setup from a color-defined drawing and was trying to add it to a named plot style drawing. So let's see this one here, just to show you what I'm talking about. Let's go page setup manager, modify. Notice how this says CTB, that's a color plot style table, and STB, which is in this floor sample, oops, close that, is a STB drawing. And I just grabbed the wrong sample to that I'd set up. You know, this is one of those things, you do this stuff in practice, and then you do it, and one little mistake, and it'll just set everything back. Notice how that says STB. These two do not mix. There are commands to convert. We don't have time for the conversion process. In fact, we're out of time. I think I've covered everything I need to, including the big mistake. This was all planned. Just kidding. It was a mistake. Hopefully this has helped. Any other questions?
Not at this time. I think we've answered them all.
Okay. Well, if there are any, let me go back to my PowerPoint here. And let's take a look here. So the PowerPoint, which again will be, there will be a link to that in the survey, has some additional resources about commands and system variables, which will affect your viewports. So a good little reference for you. And then we have quickly a look at some of the upcoming webinars. So be sure to take a look at that survey, though, for the links so that you can download this webinar as well as the slide deck. Any thoughts, Christina, Sean, Jason?
I think you've covered everything. I'm just going to add a couple of those links you mentioned to the chat window as well, in case anybody wanted to click on those right away.
Awesome. Okay, well, we thank everybody for being here, but we are out of time. Hopefully this has been of use, and hopefully I didn't confuse you guys too much there at the end. We really appreciate you guys being here, and we hope to see you in future webinars. Everybody take care, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.